Hey guys, welcome to Podcast Fandom Premium. I'm your host, Nina.
And I'm Dom.
And we are back to discuss Flower of Evil. Only one season. Episodes 15 and 16. The last episodes of the show. As you know from last week's podcast, Kaylee is no longer joining us because she wimped out of the show a few weeks ago. So it's just me and Donnie. We watched these episodes this weekend, yesterday to be exact. And I'm really excited to talk about how this mess, and when I say mess, I just mean like all the mess that happened in the show, not that the show was a mess, to talk about how this mess was wrapped up. Donnie, obviously, I'm starting with you. What were your overall thoughts?
It's like, I think about it, it's like the writers are like, all right, let's end this shit in 15, like the main story, what we've been going through all season long. Mm-hmm. But let's really fuck with the audience and come up with this crazy shit that's really gonna be sad as fuck.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
like 16 was it was just an episode by itself. It was just.
It was a show by itself.
Yeah, it's like if you read a book and then they got this. Oh, this is an extra story at the end of the book. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, as we were watching like 15, I remember thinking, okay, like all of this stuff is wrapping up. How the hell? Like, what is 16 going to be about? And I did not see that coming. I liked it though. I'll explain why, but yeah, I liked it. What else? Is that it?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I was satisfied with the ending of the main story. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I did think there was like I was telling you, there's a couple things that happened in episode 15 that were kind of annoying, but you explained one of them was the lady in the cage grabbing him. That
was probably one of my most favorite things about this entire series, to be honest.
Her saying what she said. And then the other one was the reporter just trying to be a fucking superhero and shit. And it's like, dude, you're gonna get yourself killed.
But okay, yeah, go ahead.
That's it. Just those two things really annoyed me. But the rest of it I thought was pretty good.
I want to say this now before I forget. I'm writing it down, but I still might. Hold on a second. I'm disappointed in two things that we didn't get. Not resolution. Well, one thing I would say it's resolution, but the other, it's yeah. Like, I just feel like I wanted it acknowledged. Like, the audience learned that Hee-sung, the accomplice, killed the father, the serial killer, Hyun-soo's dad. And the woman who was locked in the cage, she knew it, right? Mm-hmm. Min-suk, right? No, that was Min-suk, that's her name. She learned it because the human trafficker guy, Sang-chul, told her, right?
Right.
No, she witnessed it, so she told Sang-chul, I'm sorry. And him finding out is what made him turn on Hee-sung and call Hyun-soo to begin with. But Hyun-soo never learned that his father never committed suicide, that Hee-sung killed him. And I just feel like, I don't know. I guess he will eventually, because I'm assuming she will say that, right? Like, her testimony of like what happened to her. I feel like she'll say it. But I guess I just wanted to see it. Like, I wanted to see them finding out that this serial killer they thought killed himself all this time was actually murdered by this accomplice. But there was that, and I was just disappointed that we never got to see that woman reunite with her husband. Even though...
But he died, didn't he?
Well, they said that he didn't have long to live because he was sick, remember?
Right.
But, like, I feel like they should have told us if he died. And if he didn't, like, I would like to, I don't know, see him finding out that she wasn't dead all this time.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I guess that wasn't important. All right, let's talk about these episodes. There's a lot of detail. I feel like I have more to say about the details than overall. So, episode 15, we get begins with another flashback to the past and like filling in some gaps. And this time we see what Mujin, the reporter, when he was a kid, what he actually found in the basement.
Right.
And we knew he'd seen something. We knew he'd seen the cages, and we'd speculated that it seemed like he had seen that stuff and suspected that their father was doing some weird shit, and he never said anything. And so there was like the guilt, right? Like of having that video and knowing what was down there, right?
Right.
But what we didn't know was that he had actually seen a person, one of his victims, alive in a bag. That's
got to fuck. I mean, just the thought of that's got to fuck with you for the rest of your life. You got to feel guilty in a way that you could have saved this person's life.
And you let this man talk you into, because you were afraid, you let him talk you into the bullshit lie that it was an elk.
Right.
And more than that, like, again, like he saw that, but we also didn't know that he was confronted by the father and that whole conversation had taken place. So now, does that make you feel a little bit better about what he did later? He has a lot of guilt.
Yeah,
he was just trying to like set shit straight. Okay. So then in present day, he finds the sister stabbed. He calls the ambulance, right? And then at the same time, the cops are figuring out that, they're kind of questioning, at least Choi is, the housekeeper's death because of
the time
of death, like her body, right? The rigor mortis, right?
They're saying the rigor mortis said it, and there's like there's no way that
she shouldn't have been, right? Because they're thinking she died after like 9 p.m. because they have all this other evidence that shows she was alive. But we know that it's all doctored. So he's like, this don't quite line up. But his boss is like, well, conditions kind of factor into that. So let's just work with what we have, right?
This was like just the thought of it, like the plan. Because all this, I'm sure, was the son that planned, because he's the one that came up with this whole fucking plan of them. Like, it just the detail that he went into to have the mother go there, order the same food that she had just eaten for lunch, like all of that, like the mother fucked up because
right, because she answered the door with the knocking, but
the details of ordering the same food and all this stuff to make it look like all of it, just like that kid was smart as fuck.
He really was. He was. And then they also the cops have the CCTV footage of him, the accomplice, going to Ji-won's house and stabbing the sister, right? So they know that it's the same person who called Hyun-soo to draw him out. So they know that it's not her husband, that there is an accomplice. They just don't know who it is, right?
So they brought it up when they when she's like, oh, I got the footage from the cab and all this stuff. And they're like, why did he let himself get caught? So why do you think he did that? Do you think he really didn't know it was taking his... Okay.
Yeah, that they just...
Because they were questioning, like, why would he do
right.
that?
And that they established that later. When she figures out that it is the son, that he's not in the coma, she says the reason he was caught on the dashboard cam is because 15 years ago, the cars in Korea didn't have that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So right now, so he's been in a coma for 15 years, right, so he doesn't know. So he understood CCTV cameras, but he didn't remember. He didn't know that cars have dashboard cameras now, because apparently that is a thing in Korea, that all the cars have that. Yeah. So then Hyun-soo gives the woman in the cage, I think her name is Min-suk, he takes off the the lock that was on there before. He puts a new lock on there, and he gives her the key to it.
Zip tied it in and lock it.
Yeah, that's right. And he gives her the key, and he says that he has a plan to catch the guy that's coming there to hurt her. And when Sung talks to Sang Chol on the phone to make arrangements to meet, we see he's in a pharmacy. And I thought at night, like it's already closed up and he's stealing stuff, I guess. I thought it was his mother's pharmacy. And maybe it was, but he killed the woman in the pharmacy, didn't he?
Did he?
I feel like they cut to like a woman lying on the floor in the pharmacy.
I don't remember him killing anybody else.
So Detective Choi goes and he interviews the delivery man who delivered the food to the housekeeper's apartment. And just as he's interviewing him, and they realize a couple of things. They realize that the woman that answered the door wasn't deaf. Because the guy was like, I didn't ring the bell, I knocked. Because he was like, this woman wasn't deaf because she answered the door. And he goes, oh, well, when you ring the doorbell, a light goes off inside, so she knows that you're at the door. And he goes, yeah, but I didn't do that. I knocked because there's a lot of people with babies in that apartment complex, and he's gotten used to, knocking lightly, just in case. And
then the other one was that because they had found tofu in her system,
right.
And then they went, and the cook's like, we don't use tofu.
Right. So they realized that the food that they were attributing to being her final meal was not the food she ordered.
Yeah.
And then Ji-won realizes that the killer didn't know her face. Because if he came there to kill her, why would he kill this woman? And the fact that the sister didn't fight back, like she understood, she knew that she was being killed in place of Ji-won, right. And she let it happen to protect her niece.
And the episode didn't go to that right away, because I completely forgot that's how episode 14 ended, with her getting stabbed. Because this whole episode started with the flashback, and then it went into...
But you missed it.
Footage and...
But I was saying, remember, you missed that they did go back to it, remember? Because you were like, how did he have the blood? And I was like, because he went to the apartment. The reporter is the one who found her, and he called the ambulance, and then he was the one at the hospital. So there were a couple of scenes at the hospital before the one in which later, remember he was trying to get information, and they were like, we can only tell family. Mm-hmm. And you and I were like, stupid. You should have said you were her brother or something. Right. Yeah, there were some hospital scenes before that I think you missed.
Yeah, the only one, that first one I noticed was the one when she came there and he was there with his hands all bloody and shirt bloody.
Okay.
But when she got the phone call and she's freaking out, and they're like, I was like I completely forgot up until that point, but yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like all those little things is how she ends up piecing it together, that it was the mom pretending to be the housekeeper to protect the son, and that the son must not be in a coma anymore. He's the one going out there doing that stuff, and he got caught on the dashboard cam because he didn't know dashboard cams existed.
Right. But at that time, the reporter was already, because when she first purchased him at the hospital, he's like, oh yeah, she wanted the roster report or whatever from a certain year, because he's like, oh, the accomplice,
the volunteer list. Yes.
But at this point, they didn't know it was the son.
Right.
So he went to the house.
Yes. So he's at the house trying to get the list.
So that was another thing, because at this point, well, I guess he wouldn't know. But at this point, he goes and tells the father the whole truth, like, "Hey,
right,
his sister was stabbed and all this stuff." But at the same time, the police are telling they think the cop was stabbed,
and
so yeah, they're releasing that report like, no, his wife was stabbed,
and she, the Moojin asked for this volunteer list. And they're acting so suspicious. And I never quite understood, like, why he was so shook about this. Because if it's a list, all you have to do is literally take your son's name off the list.
Right. And I think that's what because he went in there.
He went in there, but like, why didn't he do that to begin with?
I don't know. And then he didn't shred it or anything. He just
ripped it up and threw it in the trash.
Like, cops can go in there and pull that shit out and say, "Oh, why'd you rip up your thing?"
But like, all he had to do before was just hand over all the other volunteers' names, and just left his son. Like, I thought it was like a list on like maybe official paper that he'd have to like type it over. I mean, even so, but like to see that it was just. Like, literally each volunteer had their own file. So all he had to do was not include his son's file. It's so ridiculous to me that they were sweating over that. But at this point, it's too late because, like you said, the cops already knew. Mujin didn't know. And then when the father leaves to go get the volunteer list is when Ji-won calls Mujin and tells him, from now on, only say yes or no.
Don't look suspicious.
I need you to quietly get the fuck out of there. He hangs up the phone. He's like, "Where's your bastard son?"
It's like, that's not what she told you to do. She's like, "We're on our way." Mm-hmm. This fucker.
But, he got that guilt, and he felt guilty because they also showed how Hyun-soo had promised Hyun-soo he would take care of the sister.
Right.
And then the sister immediately got stabbed and was in surgery. So, the father is going to, he pulls out a syringe and he's going to kill the reporter. And the reporter is like, I will say I like that he didn't back down here. He was like, no. He's like, you think you're going to do this, but you're not. And because his thing was, I'll kill you. And then I'll turn myself in and say that I did all that stuff and my son will eventually change. And I'm like, man, what is wrong with you? You can't love your kids that much.
And you still still thought that the serial killer was the one that changed his son. It's like,
yeah. He's in serious denial. Your son was killing dogs on rooftops before he met that man.
And then he tried to fucking stab himself. And I like that the reporters, no, you're not killing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then, Hee-sung meets with the human trafficker. He gives him a briefcase full of money. And because he, would deal with this guy before, he knew that he had a habit of smelling his cash.
Fucking put rat poisoning in it.
Is that what that was?
Yeah, they showed it when he was in the pharmacy. He picked up rat poisoning.
And he just dusted it in all the money. I have never in my life seen some shit like that.
He was dead. But it
worked.
I know. Next time we see him, he's outside just dead.
Clutching that money. Clutching that money. That money should go to the woman in the cage, to be honest. So yeah, he gets his nosebleed, he leaves, and then Hee-sung tries to go into the cage to get the woman out, but it's locked. And then he's like, "Come here." And I'm like, why? Why would she do that? You think that's going to work? I'm like, yeah, no, you'd have to figure out how to fucking get me through. You have to go away, go get a gun or something. But then Hyun-soo sneaks up behind him, beats him up, ties him up, and he's trying to get into his head and nothing is working. And Hyun-soo is like, nothing you say is going to work. We're going to call the cops and all this stuff. But when he tells him to reach into his pocket, Hee-sung's pocket to get his phone, Hyun-soo pulls out Ji-won's police ID that's covered in blood. And he's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I killed your wife. Didn't kill your daughter, but I killed your wife." He starts describing stuff in their apartment. So Hyun-soo calls the cops, and the cops have been told to, repeat this lie. So he is told that his wife is dead, little girl's fine. He starts crying and breaking down, and the woman, Min Suk in the cage, is like, "Dude, call the police. Stop it." And he's gonna kill him. And
he did try to call his wife, and then she didn't fucking.
She didn't answer the phone, right? And so she tries to talk him out of killing this man, and he goes to stab him, and Hee-sung kicks him, and falls back, and he breaks out of the chair. Never tie your victims up in a wooden chair.
Right?
Because if all they have to do is push back and fall and break that chair, and then...
And this is where she was holding him back.
She held it, and you didn't like that, but I love that because, as she said, don't let this man turn you into a murderer. This bastard.
And then the wife later, when she's talking to her, she goes, "It's only murder."
No, she actually later, she was like, murder is murder.
Yeah.
Like, the woman was like, listen, because he runs out after him, right? You're talking about after he chases Hee-sung, and the cops show up and rescue her.
And then she talks to
right.
her.
And she's like, he ran after him, but understand, if he kills him, it's not his fault. Like, your husband did nothing wrong. Right. And this nerd is like, no, murder is murder. And I'm like, see, you goofy. You are absolutely goofy. Because if it was the other way around, if he had chased after him and Hyun-soo let Hee-sung kill him, right? Like, I can't kill you even if it's self-defense. Like... What would you be saying then? Like, no. Stop being a nerd. She's like, murder is murder and murder is wrong. It's like, okay. So, yeah. And the whole time, I'm sorry, I'm going through my notes because we kind of rushed over some stuff. But the whole time, he is like, trying to get in his head before he got away, and he's like talking all this shit, and the woman in the cage is like, please call the police. She just kept saying over and over again, please just call the police. And finally he was like, you call the police, shit. I'm gonna kill this motherfucker. So Hyun-soo chases him, cuts his leg. I thought he was going to cut his Achilles tendon. I was like, do it.
Like, he stabs him in the shoulder and then cuts his leg, his thigh.
Stabs him in the thigh. And then the guy was like, just kill me and get it over with, you psychopath. And I was like, you got a lot of nerve. You got all the nerve in the world calling somebody else a psychopath. So they end up on this cliffside, and he is going to kill him, but the cops show up, including Ji-won. But at this point, he's also been seeing his dad.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't really believe that she's there because he thinks that she's dead. He can't trust himself. And she's like, just put the knife down and come and hug me if you don't believe it. And so he eventually does. But when the cops go to arrest Hee-sung, he grabs one of the cops' guns because... Oh my God. Also, that cop should be fired.
Yes.
And it is, I think his name is Im-ho, the young detective, is the one that ends up shooting and killing Hee-sung. But not before. It looks like Hyun-soo is shot in the head. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
He was shot in the head.
No, it grazed him.
But
There's
still,
a difference.
Took away 15 years.
But then they did... That's true. But then they did that thing where it's basically like her talking to him in like the afterlife or some shit. And she's like, you can go. I'll be okay. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? And what the fuck is episode 16 about? Well, as it turns out, I don't have a lot of notes.
In the afterlife.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have a lot of notes on episode 16 because at this point, it's really just wrapping stuff up, right? Like, people are caught, but we had some loose ends. One being...
the sister being the main, that was the big thing, was the sister, because the sister was still the whole like 15
the sister was
the main thing of this. They were looking for the person that killed this guy 15 years 20 years ago, whatever it was,
right?
But the leader of the village,
right, the sister confessed that it was her, so she was on trial for that,
right? And
they Choi, because again, Detective Choi, we learned a few episodes ago, had basically figured out that Hyun-soo hadn't killed the village head, that it was the sister, and that she was protecting him. And that was like the main reason he didn't turn Hyun-soo in. Like, he trusted that he was, you know what I mean? Like, he was willing to continue to work with Ji-won and clearing his name. Because again, he knew that there was an accomplice, that Hyun-soo hadn't been the one to kill those other people. But everybody thought that Hyun-soo had killed the village head. So once he knew that, he was on his side. Now that the sister's on trial, he's still, I guess, like working the case, and they obviously don't want her to go to jail for this. And he figures out that there's a potential witness that may be able to corroborate the shitty treatment that the village had displayed toward Hyun-soo, right? Because remember, him and the sister had gone to live with him.
Right.
After the dad died, right? And he was basically getting money for them and using that money, basically stealing it.
Okay, that's why I didn't understand what he was doing with the money.
Right. So, while that's going on, we learn that Hyun-soo was in a coma for like 4 months.
Yeah.
And when he woke up, he thought he was waking up from getting hit by the car.
Right. So everything that happened to it when he got hit by the car and everything after that, he completely forgot.
Right. He doesn't remember pretending to be the son, getting married, having a daughter, any of this stuff.
Right.
So because of that, he doesn't have like memories or feelings for her, and he is living with the reporter while his sister is on trial, right?
I like that because he knew the reporter before that.
Yes.
So that made sense to me that, okay, yes, this is somebody he knew from school. Right. They were friends and stuff.
And because, like, I'm sure he trusts that everyone is telling him the truth about the past 15 years, right? Like, it's not like he didn't believe it. You also then have the sister and all the other people telling you what the reporter did and trying to clear your name and your sister's name. So it makes sense that he would trust him from that standpoint too. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But the main thing is that he doesn't like have feelings for her, and he doesn't like being around her because as far as he knows, he was pretending to love this woman. Mm-hmm. And he's like embarrassed by that. He's ashamed, right? And he feels like when he's with her, she is looking for the man he used to be. And he's thinking, that man was a fake. Like, I don't even know how to be because I've spent the past 15 years apparently lying to you. So, yeah. And it feels like when they clear up the stuff with the sister, is it turns out that it was the village head's nephew, and he at first doesn't want to testify because of his involvement, and that he did things to make people, like he killed that cat and because his uncle asked him to, so they could blame Hyun-soo so that he could convince the people in the village that they needed to pay for these exorcisms that they were doing on this kid. So that's how he was basically lying to people and getting money to perform these exorcisms on Hyun-soo. But the weird things that were going on in the village, Hyun-soo hadn't done them. It was the village head's nephew because he told them to. Right. So this guy eventually testifies to that. And it sounds like the jury found her... it feels like the court, like the judges and the jury came to two different things. Right. And it's the judges who were like... found her
guilty, but the judge said based off of, because of what happened, it happened at night and all this other stuff.
Right. So she's found not guilty. And then as it turns out, she decides to leave the country to go study. This is where everything just started getting sad as shit.
Yeah, she wanted to go do her movie stuff. Mm-hmm. That's what I took it. She wanted to do her movie stuff. I don't know who that guy was that she named, but I'm assuming it was some kind of special effects artist or something. A famous
I missed that.
Yeah, she had named that she was fascinated by some guy, but it sounded like he was from. She just said abroad, so I'm guessing U.S. I don't know. But that's where she wanted to go and study for that. So, but that was sad because the reporter, like, through this whole thing, it felt like he was getting closer and closer to her, and he was falling back into love with her and stuff like that. And then she's like, "Yeah, I'm leaving."
I mean,
and he
but
was,
like they still kept in touch and stuff.
I like that. Like,
yeah.
It at first he was like, "Oh, okay, I'll forget you" and all this stuff. He walked out the restaurant.
Yep.
And he's crying in the street.
And she tells him, "Go comfort him." And Hyun-soo goes out there, and then he's like, "If you're gonna comfort me, do it already." So that is
a lot of time jumping, and that was
yeah. I was saying this last episode was just a lot of like resolving. The one thing I did like, I will say that I liked that they made it so that he had to learn how to be with her again. He had to discover his feelings for her on his own. Mm-hmm. As opposed to like the first time where he did spend a lot of time using her, even though we see that he eventually did, you know what I mean? Fall for her.
Right.
But the fact that he didn't remember that, I like that he was responsible enough to be like, no, I can't just jump into this relationship with you.
Right.
And because I don't know you, and what I do know about our relationship, it sounds like I was just a fucking liar and this terrible person. How do I know that I'm not this person? And so he ends up doing things like talking to his sister and even going to visit the woman pretending to be his mother in prison. Mm-hmm. And even she has to tell him, you cared about her.
Yeah, at first she didn't, or whatever it was.
She's like, I thought that you used to hate having us around her, and I thought it was because you thought she would figure it out, right? But it was just because she was precious to you, and you were trying to protect her from us. Yeah, and then we see the father is not in jail; he's like in the hospital because he's like losing his mind.
Yep,
and he sees Hyun-soo, but Hyun-soo visits him, but he sees Hee-sung.
Yep.
And his hair is green in the front for some reason that we are never told. I'm like, why the fuck is his hair green? And I didn't say this, but Hyun-soo died. Like,
yes. Yeah. I shot a guy shot in the heart.
Yeah. Let's see. I actually did have notes. I thought I didn't have notes, so I am... Oh yeah, that's it. That's all I have. So it ends when he starts like trying to get back into like metalworking, trying to, get back into his old life as much as he can. And he ends up visiting the shop, which I guess they had put up for sale because it turns out Ji-won wants to move to Busan. She put in a transfer request. But in the end, he professes his feelings to her.
I like that, like when they're just showing us the memory stuff. Like I really thought they were going to show us the mother's store and him being by there and remembering, but then I do like where he's just walking down the street and all of a sudden you hear rain, but it's not raining. It's like sunny out, and he starts remembering.
Yes, on his own.
Right, on his own. I like that because at first she's trying to force it and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like, no, I don't remember any of this. It doesn't feel right.
Right.
But then seeing it through him just walking down the street and just something just pops in his head. Like that's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way when they get to the daughter, like him hugging her and then having those flashes that they showed us. I felt like those are his memories coming back to him.
Oh, and the other thing that was so funny is there was a scene where the reporter comes home and he opens the fridge and he's like, what the fuck? And you know that he lives with him, so it's like, what the fuck did he put in the reporter's fridge? But the scene cuts and you go somewhere else, and then I'm like, was it like heads in jars? Like, what the fuck is in the fridge?
Is he really a serial killer?
Right. And then it turns out that he kept buying egg tarts because that's what the daughter liked. But he didn't know why. That's why he whenever he would pass them in the store, he would just have the impulse to buy them, and he just kept putting them in the fridge. And so yeah, he ends up like reuniting with his daughter, and he's so shocked, that she's like, you're my favorite person in the world.
I like the because they've shown it so many times throughout this whole season. Especially down at the bottom, it would put it in English what the name of the store was, and it never it's.
Oh yeah,
I always thought it was
the
a
Rising
unique
Star
name.
stays,
right?
Yeah.
And I always thought it was unique because every time they showed multiple times throughout the season, they would show the sign and then the translation of it. So I liked that story. Like it was always named after her, which was cool.
Yeah. So that's it. They are going to be a happy family, I guess. Yeah. Yay. So that's it. I'm trying to think if there was any, everybody got wrapped up, right? At one point, her mom was like, I know you're not going to forgive that motherfucker. Mm-hmm. She's like, I had a fucking heart attack over this shit. And you telling me you're going to forgive him? She's like, please, Mom, when you see him, it's not his fault. Just welcome him and embrace him like you do me. I was like, you asking a lot, sis. But, yeah. So we have already started our next K-drama, The Glory. Kaylee and I have watched the first 2 episodes. You have watched what?
The first 2.
Oh, did you?
Mm-hmm.
Are you okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because you were stressed when you wrote us.
It's violent.
You were like, I'm so uncomfortable. How did you guys watch this? How do you do this? I'm so uncomfortable. This is too much. But yeah. So The Glory is, I want to say 6 episodes, maybe 8, but that's just the first part. The second part comes back in March. So we're going to be covering the first part. We're doing 2 episodes at a time because we were going to do 1 at a time, but Kaylee and I watched the first one and she was like, let's just watch the next one. So we watched 2. So we'll be recording for that later in the week, probably this weekend because it jumps off next week. But yeah, I want to thank all of you for listening. If you are premium, as you know, Time Travel Tier has been a week ahead with this show. It is now currently going up on our free channel, but at this point, so like if you're listening to this for free, just know that this was a while ago. Premium gets early access sometimes days ahead, sometimes weeks ahead, sometimes months ahead on our coverage. So if you want to become a premium subscriber and get early access to this and other K-dramas that we've covered, plus exclusive coverage of certain animes and other dramas, you can head over to patreon.com/podcastfandom to sign up. There are 2 premium tiers available. One tier, the highest tier, the time travel tier, comes with not just early access, but exclusive access to shows that we don't cover anywhere else, plus video reactions to shows like The Last of Us and Attack on Titan. So our video reactions for now are exclusive to the time travel tier. So yeah, a lot of good stuff if you head over to Patreon. But if you are listening for free and want to support us as well, you can always drop an iTunes review or, just share the podcast with your friends and family online. We love to have them listen too. That's it. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for subscribing as always. And hopefully you will join us on our next K-drama journey. Like I said, it's called The Glory. It's on Netflix and it's really, really good. And it is violent, but it's based on an actual true story. That bullying that you saw, Donnie, that actually happened.
Then everybody needs to fucking die.
Even like the curling eye and all of that. That's a real case.
That's so fucked up.
In I believe it was in Cheongju, South Korea. Yeah. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next time.